Maybe we can begin to answer some of those questions. Alexandra Hurlia is the former Romanian Minister for European Integration, former ambassador to the EU for Romania. Mr. Hurlia, thank you very much for joining us by phone from Cluj, or on the road to Cluj, as I understand it. Can you answer first, and briefly, because we're running out of time in this half, the political class somehow failing Romanians by not moving quickly enough?
I would say Romania acceded to the European Union as a result of a political decision, and it's a right decision. I am convinced that the only way to help really Romania is to integrate it in the European Union. And this means as well to help Romania to fight against corruption. This is the key point of Romania's difficulties, because what happened after the fall of the Berlin Wall is the fact that the former nomenclatura and the former Securitate kept the power. In fact, the real power is even today in the hands of the former structures I spoke about, nomenclatura and Securitate. And this reality is as a kind of background of all Romanian political and economical life.
Mr. Hurlia, we need to leave it there. We will come back to you in the second half of our debate. I'm sorry I have to cut you off there. We need to go to a break. Stay with us, all of you, please, for the next part of the France 24 debate coming up.
I speak to the camera, yeah?
Programme. Let's now get underway the France 24 debate. Romania, living with Ceausescu's ghost. 20 years since the fall of the brutal dictator and his family, we discuss the changes and opportunities for Romania. Before we meet our guests, all with their unique take from their own perspective of the situation in Romania since, now, and what's going to happen next. Let's take a look back at the events of 1989.
This lifeless body belonged to Nicolae Ceausescu, whose career as dictator ended after just days of uprising in Romania. The man nicknamed the Leader ruled Romania with an iron fist, beginning in 1965. Timișoara was the first city to rise up in 1989. Violent repression of the people caused dozens of deaths. 5 days later, Romania's president called a mass meeting, but he didn't know what he was in for. Instead of cheers, the crowd erupted in boos and insults. Bucharest quickly followed, with violent street fights pitting insurgents against Ceausescu's militiamen. The tide then started turning throughout the country. The army got friendly with the people. Opponents then took the state television stage hostage and broadcast their message to the whole nation. Don't say socialist Romania, just say Romania. A revolution caught on camera for the first time, and which illustrated the medium's potential for manipulation. Revolutionaries in Timișoara showed off what they said were martyrs tortured by police, but the bodies actually belonged to people who had died of natural causes. Faced with mounting pressure, the dictator tried to flee his palace by helicopter, but he was quickly arrested along with his wife, Elena. Both were judged by a military court. The trial only lasted 55 minutes. The couple were given the death penalty. Even their execution was televised, a brutal image that marked the end of Romania's dictatorship.
Images today still vivid in the imaginations of many people and, of course, very much part and parcel of the mindset and very much in the minds of the people of Romania. Let's introduce you now to our special guests, so all with their unique view of the situation in Romania. Joining us here in the studio is Adina Crișan. Adina, thanks for joining us, research assistant at Sciences Po, the Centre for European Studies at Sciences Po here in Paris. Thanks for being with us.
Good evening. Thank you for this invitation.
Okay, well, thank you for coming. It's great to have someone in the studio. Let's introduce you now to our other guests who are joining us from afar. First, by satellite from Montreal, or Montreal as English people call it, in Canada, is Lavinia Stan, PhD, Associate Professor at the Department of Political Science at St. Francis Xavier, or St. Francis Xavier University in Montreal. Thank you for joining us, Lavinia.
Thank you very much for having me.
Brilliant. We'll hear from you in a moment's time. Also by phone from Aix-les-Bains here in France is Radu Stoinescu. Radu, of course, has been a guest here on this debate many times, a philosopher and member of Riposte Laïque. Radu, Riposte Laïque, a secular think tank, is that the best way to describe it?
Thank you, Mark. Good evening to all our listeners.
And thank you very much for joining us. So we'll be coming back to you in a moment. I'm going to start the debate here in the studio with our guest who's here in person, Adina Christian from Sciences Po here in Paris. Adina, without asking you a rude question, how old were you at the start of the revolution when it happened?
Well, when the revolution started, I was 7 years old.
I'm trying not to ask you how old you are, because that's a rude question to ask a lady, obviously. Seeing the pictures on our report, what does that bring back for you?
Well, it was a blood revolution, in fact, so it was harsh images for me. But in the same time, I try to remember the past and to compare with the future. So these images are very difficult indeed. But in the same time, I'm trying to understand what happened since then and to compare with what Romania has accomplished till now. And to my part, Romania accomplished a very important thing because Romania accessed to the European Union. And this is, for me, the future of Romania. A European Romania. That's the future, in fact.
That's the future. Do you think that you would have had the chance to come study in Paris and develop academically the way you have if the Ceausescu regime had still continued?
Well, the answer is clearly no, because I remember at the time I didn't see myself outside Romania. It was a kind of I don't know, maybe the word is too harsh, but it was kind of a mental prison. In fact, I didn't see myself out of the geographic limits of Romania, and well, after the breakdown of the communist regime, everything well started. It started, in fact, a new life for me because I had the opportunity to come and discover the Europe, in fact, to discover the culture, to discover everything what was unknown for me at the time. And for me, this is what it should have happened even before that.
Okay, Adina, thank you for the moment. I'll get back to you very, very shortly. Let's go now to our guest by satellite from Montreal in Canada, Lavinia Stan from the St. Francis Xavier, I'll say it in the English way, the St. Francis Xavier University over there. Lavinia, thank you for joining us. We've heard Adina Christian here in the studio talking about how young she was when the revolution happened. I was a great deal older, obviously. I went to Romania shortly after the revolution. I was struck by the poverty that people were living in and struck by how people were struggling to live. Do you feel there's been big changes since then, or are there still some people who have the same struggle?
Well, changes have happened, certainly, but Romania is also known as a country with a lot of problems like corruption, problems like poverty. So I would say that in spite of the real progress, political, economic and social, that Romania has registered during the last 20 years, the problems are still there. By the way, I was 23 at the revolution. I was part of the revolution. I was one of the students on the street, and I remember it fondly, in spite of the casualties registered those days.
That must have been, Lavinia, an incredibly, well, you say you remember it fondly. It must have been a very scary time, a time of great fear for you.
But at the same time, it was a time of hope. it was a time of hope that the hope we never had hope during Ceausescu. I remember that I was portraying myself as dying under communism. Yeah, so the Romanian Revolution of December 1989 was a tremendous opportunity for us. Of course, it was a bloody revolution. People died. A lot of people died. It was the only Eastern European bloody revolution. But at the same time, it helped us move on with our lives. You know, we really didn't have that much of a life before.